Get real advice from renowned experts and entrepreneurs on today's business leaders. Here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, on today's show, I have Annabelle Beckwith, and she has been a consultant and coach for 20 years, which is awesome. And I've personally worked with her and have really enjoyed my experience. And I'm going to list these again at the end, but you can visit her at Yara-Journeys.com. So that's YARA-Journeys.com for her business website. And you can also just go to AnnabelleBeckwith.com. And we're going to talk about something exciting that's coming there when we get to that point. So welcome to the show, Annabelle.
Thank you very much, Gabe. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. So I always start out this way, and I didn't know part of your story until I talked about having you on the show. I'm so excited to talk about part of it because I have something very similar in common in my experience. But when did you first realize that you were an entrepreneur?
So probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And there's a reason for that. And that's because here in the UK, the term entrepreneur it tends to not be one that people have embraced and taken on themselves until relatively recently. So I've been running my own business for the last 20 years and just getting on with it, and seen myself as a consultant, a coach, a business owner, a company director, which officially I am as the owner of a registered business. And it was only relatively recently when people would start to say to me, so Annabelle, as an entrepreneur, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? And I'd be going, what, who, me? Oh, right, if you say so. So for that reason, as a entrepreneur, to use the word, not that long. Having said that, if I think about the spirit of the question, I think like many people who have ended up running their own businesses, I do remember when I was a child, like trading sweets in the playground and like making friendship bracelets for friends and, and doing these kind of things. So I've always, even when I was little, I had an eye for like making some extra pocket money or something somewhere along the line. So I don't know, maybe that was the germ of an idea back in the playground all of those years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really realize that terminology wise over in Europe. So that's good information. But like you said, yeah, it sounds like it started pretty early on for you. And I'm always curious, and I don't know the answer to this, but I'm always curious. Do you think there was some event really young that like made you choose to be entrepreneurial, or do you think you were just born entrepreneurial? And like, obviously you've developed over there. It's like being born an entrepreneur doesn't make you successful at it, but maybe there's some kind of like organic matter that's already there when we started. But what like made you go, oh, I'm going to go make and sell things? Because I did that as a kid too. And I don't really know how it started. I developed it and like justified it and got good at it later.
Yeah.
I don't know how it came about for me as I'm thinking about it.
Well, for me, I have to say it was, right, so the stark matter was I was in a job and I was made redundant. And it was the sort of job where if I wanted an equivalent position in a similar organization, I would have to move like hundreds of miles away. And I thought, I don't really want to do that. So it was a position where it's right. I've got to do something here. What am I going to do? And actually, I remembered something that my dad, he was in his early 80s now, but he always said that he had a teacher when he was at school who said to him, find something you love doing and get somebody to pay you for it. And my dad's teacher had told him that. Now, my dad ended up working for British Airways for about 37 years, flying all over the world, in the heyday of flying. And having heard his teacher say that, my dad thought, I like going on holiday and going fishing. How do I get somebody to pay me doing that? And then he had this amazing career traveling the world. But that phrase always stuck with me. So when I lost my job, I thought, right, okay, what have I got? What do I love doing? How do I leverage this? And I just started to take a step forward. I didn't have a business plan. I had a little bit of money behind me from my redundancy payout. Didn't really have a clue what I was doing. I knew that there were certain skills that I had that could help people. So I just started approaching people whom I thought I could help. And from there, a business started to grow. And it's kind of shifted and changed and so on and broadened in its scope over the last 20 years. But that was how it started. So I mean, who knows? Maybe I would at some point have set up on my own anyway. But I really do believe that sometimes life makes choices for you that you were too chicken to make yourself. That was certainly true for me then. Like losing my job was the precipitating factor. It was like, okay, now what? So at that point, it was a necessity rather than anything else, rather than bravely choosing to, leave corporate. And I wasn't that at all. It was like, do or die. Oh, I've got kids to feed. I've got bills to pay.
Yeah. No, I think kids are a great gift. They keep us pretty motivated, keep us moving the right direction if we can use that.
Absolutely.
That fuel. And you shared something that I wanted to dig into a little bit because, interestingly enough, when I built my construction company, and then got stuck for $250,000 in the housing market crash. Like a couple of my clients had their credit lines dry up, and so projects froze, and there was a trickle down effect of losing everything. Mm-hmm. I lost that company, went bankrupt for $1 million, and then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to restart and try to, just move into the tech and marketing thing because I think that's really where my skills are, which has proved to be true. But I was building up a business with a partner, and then I literally woke up one day and they had stolen all the clients and all the money. And I think maybe you have something that may have happened to you like that.
I did. Yeah. Oh, here we are laughing about it now, Gabe. It certainly wasn't funny at the time.
No, it was a little scary.
It's one of those things that at the time, I just remember that day. And, I should have smelt a rat because I was doing kind of the marketing and the product and service design and so on. And then this friend had an eye on the finances. And whenever I said to her, all of these things, wisdom in retrospect, whenever I said to her, can we go over the figures? Because I want to know where we are. It's like there was always a reason not to. Is that the time? There was always a reason not to. And then one day I said to her, right, I really need to invest in marketing for this thing. And she said, we haven't got any money. And I thought, what do you mean we haven't got any money? Because at least I had a mental, I've been writing proposals and pitches. I knew what clients were paying us roughly, maybe not to the last pound and penny, but a pretty good idea. Anyway, there was a reason for her to leave. And I went to the filing cabinet where all the financial bits and pieces were. And I thought, it's jammed. And then I had this horrible feeling where I thought, it's locked. So I was in tears. I phoned my ex-husband who arrived with a crowbar. We jimmied our way into this to discover that in all of the checkbooks as it was back then, it was £500 cash. We had an agreement that if there was anything that cost more than £500, we would both countersign the check. So everything was £450, £490. And the bank was terrific. They put a stop on the account right away, but it was to the tune of £20,000 that had gone missing.
Holy cow. And
the thing was, Gabe, when I phoned her, you can imagine how furious I was. And I was going, what is going? The first thing she said was, I can't believe you don't trust me. I don't think I can work with you anymore. I was going, right. It was just, anyway. But that might have been a turning point to say, right, well, obviously this isn't for me. But it wasn't, because I loved what I was doing, so I continued doing it. The other big lesson that I learned is that not everybody is untrustworthy. So although I was really, really wary of going into any kind of partnership arrangement with anybody, a few years later I did. I set it up differently. It was a limited company rather than a partnership, which is a different legal entity here in the UK. But my business partner of several years, Ian Thompson, we're still really good friends. He's studying for a PhD now. And we still work together, but he was an absolute joy to work with and utterly, utterly trustworthy. But yeah, that was an early scare.
Yeah. And I'm glad you recovered from it. I'm glad that you shared there too, that you learned that you can still trust people, because that was super hard for me, because I got burned by customers and a business I lost, and then I got burned by a business partner, and man, that makes you not want to trust anybody. That's for sure. But I was super fortunate as well. And I'm really grateful because Rachel showed up in my life, and, we became business partners before we became life partners. And she is a phenomenal partner and has restored my faith in humanity in a lot of things. And also taught me about the things that I do that, I take responsibility for a lot of what happened, because I look back and I was not a very good leader. I don't even know if I was a leader at that level.
Yeah.
as you know, and this is where we really resonate. And this is where I've just always enjoyed seeing your content and the time we've been able to spend together and just having this conversation, is that you really get leadership and you also see through the bullshit like I do. And, and so what is, and I know that's what you help people with. And there's something cool that you help me with that I want to, talk about with it. I'll share with everybody here in a minute. But what has been the journey from there? And like, we both kind of got kicked in the teeth to really being somebody that understands leadership and develops that and really helps your clients with that. Because I think that's sometimes I feel like it's a lost art. It's not. I mean, you and I are all about that, but sometimes I think people just don't understand the depth and impact of leadership. So how did you get there, and what does that look like for you now today?
So how I got there was no like melodramatic story that one day I woke up and there's none of this blah stuff. It's almost been like this creeping evolution over the years, where literally I would start working with one client, let's say here in Scotland, and I'll go, oh, now that's interesting, because what's going on here is this is what they say the problem is, but actually the actual cause of it is a little bit is much deeper than that. And so I would see something happening in Scotland, and then I would be working in London, and it would be like, oh look, it's the same thing's happening here. And then it started to happen all over the place, and then I'd work in the States and think, this is looking familiar, and then in the Middle East, and then in Asia, and then in North Africa, and you think, this is clearly who we are as a species. This is what human beings do when they come together as a community. And I believe that your business is a community and an ecosystem. It's not a machine with cogs in it. This is how human beings function when we come together as a group of people to achieve some kind of common purpose. And do you know what, Gabe? It's got to a point now where it's almost like you go into an organization and they explain what their issues are, and you think, right, okay, I've got a pretty good idea what this might be. In the same way that, like, if your car is making a weird noise, I would take it to my mechanic and go, oh, it's just going beep, 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 it's making this. He'd go, yeah, I think that's the rear crankshaft widget thing. And if it's not that, then it's likely to be this, that, because he knows that sound, that presenting issue, the underlying cause is that, whatever that gadget thing is at the back of the car. And it's that type of thing. It's like, we've got a problem with this. And you think, okay, that's the presenting problem. The actual issue is going to be somewhere else. And at first with some trepidation, because you think, has anybody else noticed this? Is this just me? And then you put it into practice, you think, yeah, I am right, because you can see that your customers are going, oh my goodness, yes, you're right. And sometimes people would say, that's it, you've done it. And I'm thinking, well, I'm just stating the obvious here. I'm seeing what I've seen for the last 20 years. But I think the same for all of us. When we're in amongst it and we can only see what's in front of us here, we can't see the forest for the trees. And sometimes it takes that external perspective to say, actually, it's this. And please don't worry, because it's not just you. It's pretty much everybody. And that's a huge thing for people as well, is any program, especially when it's face-to-face or it's a group coaching environment, the way people are like palpably going, oh, thank the Lord, it's not just me, it's everybody. You think, yes, it is, because these are patterns and principles of human behavior. So it has very much kind of evolved over the years, and now I've kind of distilled it down into these 5 principles that kind of underpin everything else. So it's taken 20 years to get to this point. But that's where I am now. Having sort of distilled it down to, okay, it's kind of this. Here's the framework, folks.
Yeah. And I love when I brought you in to consult for us, what I really enjoyed is, like, you helped me kind of distill it down to, here's the core components. Here's the things that if you focus on will move people forward. And one of the things that, as I look back at that, it's been kind of like the genesis of creating these like icons in my organization. Because if I remember correctly, I think we invented the circle of life together. Is that what we did together?
There was some kind of some kind of
tree.
There was some kind of something that was like, is it this? Is it that? Yes, it's a bit like, it was one of those kind of box of frogs kind of thinking sessions there.
So spending that time with you is super valuable, because it's taught me to create like iconic for lack of a better term, I guess, as I'm talking it out, like almost like these totem poles in our company culture where we can go, oh, you remember that story? You remember that's how we operate here? And this is why. And so since then, I've created like, I don't know, maybe not quite a dozen, but little tools that I give out to my team and to my clients around communication or around leadership or how we make decisions. I just really like how you help me like conceptualize and make that into like a cultural thing that we pass around. It's, and it's been really, really incredible. And I know in your book that's coming out, which I am super excited about getting, you've kind of boiled this down into, these 5 principles. Can you talk a little bit about what those are and like maybe just touch on how that helps when people go, oh, it's the issues around this principle. What does that look like?
Yeah. So the 5 principles, the five P's framework, as it were, are personal, purpose, people, process, and paradigm. So just to like briefly go through it, personal is all about that the entire focus is on the entrepreneur and the business owner as a human being and having clarity, courage, capability, and character. So it's all about you. What are your personal values and your aspirations, and so on. For 2 reasons. One, really, the first is, doesn't matter what line of work you're in, whether you're a leader because you've got the badge on your door or whether it's personal leadership, the inner work comes first. If you do not grow and develop yourself, you won't be able to grow and develop your business. So that's the thing. It's like focusing on the inner work first. The second thing is, in all the years I've been working with entrepreneurs, there's such a lot of talk about all of the hardships of entrepreneurship and all of the things that you've got to sacrifice. And sadly, I have seen people, arrive, but their partners have left them. Their kids hardly know who they are. It's like, you know what, folks? It's your journey. It's your business. It's your life. You make really sure that you're not sacrificing the wrong thing. You choose. You get to choose. Don't live to other people's expectations. So that's what the personal piece is all about, the personal development and growth. The next one is around purpose, your business vision, purpose, and strategy, and how that breaks down into functional goals and ultimately to individual goals. But the key thing here is about communicating your purpose, not just holding a rough idea in your own mind, but really communicating it. Because, as we've seen increasingly over the last few years, people don't just want to know about the what and the how. They really want to feel a connection to the why, whether that's your customers, whether that's your team. Sometimes that might be your suppliers. There's that connection. So that's what that focuses on. The people is very much around your business structure. Who have you got on board? Where are they? Who reports to who? This is how it is now. If your aspiration and your strategy is that, how might it need to change? And then, of course, there's also a piece around, well, how do you lead and manage people? Beyond that comes processes. So what's happening with your processes? Do your processes support your people to deliver on your strategy and purpose that fulfills your own personal aspirations? So like everything's kind of leading on from the next. And the final P is paradigms. What is the culture that you are building? And the thing here is, your business is going to have a culture, whether you're consciously creating it or not. And if you're not doing it as the leader, it's probably going to be the person with the strongest character on your team who's driving that culture. You happy with that? Possibly not. So it is a question of like designing your culture. And whilst, it might sound really fluffy, how do we do that? There are practical things that you can do to build and drive that culture. So again, I explore that in the book. So it's not, I'm not trying to give anybody answers here. I'm not trying to tell them what to do. What I am trying to do is to say, look, here's a thinking framework. Here's some food for thought. And if you work through these principles in this order, it's going to help. It's going to save you time and money as you build your business. It's going to save you a heck of a lot of stress, because these are principles that loads of other people have been through and either got right and it's been great, or got wrong, myself included there. And it hasn't. So it's, these are tried and tested methods, as it were, for moving forward. Leaders will also find there's going to be some things that they do brilliantly well, or they're a real people person, so they're fantastic at that. Maybe there's a gap to be filled. Maybe their processes aren't quite so hot, or maybe their strategy isn't as clearly articulated as it might be. So it's also about identifying gaps in your business, filling those gaps properly, and making sure you've got a rock solid foundation for your future growth.
That's awesome. I am super excited to read it, like I said, because I just love how you show up and how you think about things from a leadership perspective. Because I think it's John Maxwell. Obviously he's a pretty big in the leadership space, but everything rises and falls on leadership. And I really like what you just touched on, and I want to highlight it so people do not miss it. That first, you have to lead yourself personally.
Yeah.
And if you can't, if you're not doing personal development and improvement, and you're not growing, then you're not setting an example of how to grow and develop. And so your team can't do it, because as the human species, and I think you have so much more knowledge on this than I do with what you've dove into, but I believe like in some senses, we can only do what we've been shown how to do.
Yeah.
Like some of us can make some, truly original headway on our own without support or modeling, but the majority of what we do in life is modeled to us. And so we get to choose, once we're adults, obviously we get to choose who we allow to model to us and be like our mentors and examples. But even that comes back to personal leadership and saying like, well, I'm going to lead myself and make changes so that other people can see that, or I can move that. And I wish that all business owners, entrepreneurs spent as much time working on themselves as they did their business, because they'd be happier and healthier and wealthier, in my opinion. And I just wish that there was more focus there. And so that's just really why I love who you are, what you represent, and what you talk about. And like I said, I'm just absolutely thrilled to get the book as soon as it's ready. So
I'll make sure you get a copy. Oh, you're absolutely right there. That whole role modeling thing. I mean, I have in the past said there was one person who, I quickly identified as not my ideal client, backed away. But somebody who came to me and said, I want you to come in and fix my team. You think, that's not going to quite work. And to the extent that this person was saying, I'm a great boss, because they're all rubbish, they're all useless, I would fire them. And the only thing I could think of to say is like, well, you hired them.
Yeah.
And it was like, I just need to go, well, thank you very much, but I don't. So, let's step quickly away from that one. But the role modeling thing is so critical, because we are all, as leaders, as human beings, as parents, perhaps, as leaders in any context, we're all role modeling something.
Yeah.
What is it? And people are going to copy, whether it's adults within our team, whether it's our kids or whatever. People are going to copy what we do before they do what we tell them. So, just as an obvious example, if you're like, let's take your kids as an example. If you're trying to teach your children not to use bad language, and you yourself swear like a sailor, what do we think is going to happen here? But they will copy the behaviors, and this happens in every environment. And actually, particularly in early stage businesses, for better or for worse, the character of the entrepreneur absolutely governs the environment and the culture of the business every single time. And when there's a leadership team, obviously there's a different dynamic. There's a slightly different dynamic that starts to fit there, and then it becomes the culture of the leadership team. And the bigger the organization, it might be the culture of the team leader. The department leader governs the culture of that particular department, but it happens. That's one of those principles. That's just the way that it works.
Yeah. What do you think happens like in organizations like where either the entrepreneur or the main leader really isn't a strong leader, or even on teams like, a department or team where the leader doesn't have that strength or ability to experience? What typically happens there, like at the team level? Do you see, because I think you've done a lot more work in this area than me, do you see that there's somebody that just kind of self-selects and steps up and maybe takes it the right way or the wrong way? Or what's the common path when the true like CEO, entrepreneur, whoever is leading the company doesn't drive that, or the actual team leader who's positionally there doesn't happen? What do you see happen there typically?
So exactly as you just said there, Gabe, somebody else will step into the vacuum. And you see this a lot. So there's two things. The leader who, let's face it, quite often when we set up a business, we don't set out to be business managers and people managers and leaders. We set out to do the thing that we do. And suddenly there's all this other stuff that we've got to do. But the key thing is that you can learn to do this so much. There are techniques that we can learn and develop and grow. So, which is why you find that there's no one single type of leader. People of all different personalities and backgrounds can lead very, very successfully. Perhaps particularly if they start to recognize what their strengths and weaknesses are, they can bring in at a senior management level, they can bring in other people to their leadership team who complement them in terms of skills and personality. So plug their gaps, basically. Where somebody is just not leading and is leaving a vacuum, this is one of those things where let's work with the human condition here, folks, rather than pretend it doesn't exist. Somebody else is going to step into that gap. And often, and I've seen it, I'm like, okay, well, obviously I can't name names, but I've seen this in a few companies where the leadership team, for whatever reason, maybe they've got a very laissez-faire attitude, or no, I don't like you, get on with it, and everybody else is standing there going, well, who's steering the ship here? Nobody. And then it's as though they go, right, well, it might as well be me then. Somebody will step into that gap, and they might not be the person with the management title. They are the alpha male or the alpha female within that particular group. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can work well because they're a strong figure. I've seen that where the leadership was really weak. Somebody else from the sales team had actually stepped up to the helm and was actually the person who was driving the business forward. I've also seen it work in situations where it's actually become toxic because the person who was stepping into that vacuum was actually at odds with the person who was actually the leader. So there was a really tricky dynamic within that company's culture. But exactly that, Gabe. If you're not developing yourself as a leader and developing the skills you need to lead, mm-hmm. somebody else is going to take on that role. Yeah. And you won't have a choice in who that is because they will just self-select.
Yeah. Yeah, I've found myself in that scenario in different projects or organizations or things over the years where I'm like, well, nobody's doing anything, so I'm going to step in and do it because I'm very anti, well, I don't even know how to put it. I'm totally against inaction. Yeah. And so I'm always like, well, if we take action, we'll figure something out. And so, yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, I think you're right. It probably can become pretty toxic in many cases. In the ideal, maybe somebody steps up and supports you and helps you get to where you're going. But
it's usually up to chance, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a little bit
with a positive intent, or somebody who, because like you, there's been times where I thought, nobody, looks like it's me then, and just kind of got on with it because it's like, all right then. And to be honest, sometimes I'd rather somebody else had stepped forward, but they just didn't. So here we are. But I'm doing so from a place of integrity. I'm not doing so from a place of disruption, which sometimes people will be doing it from a place of ego and power struggle and actual destruction of the status quo. And that's when you're really in a spot of bother when that starts to happen.
Yeah. And even if you come from it, I think just like I know you do, and like I do, I always try to, you come from a place of, I'll step up and serve and help. Because the leader isn't strong enough and developed, that can really backfire on you, even if you're trying to do all the right things, because then their ego and pride gets in the way, or it becomes political instead of productive. And it's definitely interesting. And one of the other things that I'd be curious to ask you, because I think, like I said, you have so much experience in leadership and you've led a lot of great projects and companies this way, is I have noticed as I built my organization that I get less and less feedback, and I have to work really hard to get feedback, which is okay. I don't mind working hard for things I need, but I feel like I keep getting more and more siloed from getting direct feedback as the leader. And, as a leader in my organization, we have a lot of great leaders here. But have you ever created any mechanisms, or how do you deal with that? I'm sure you've seen that where a leader can get too siloed or too far up the food chain, or however we want to say it, so they're not getting input and feedback. And that, I think feedback is super helpful if anybody wants to grow, and I want to keep growing. So what are your thoughts around that? Have you seen that?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, so what you're doing and continuously asking for feedback is for a start, a good thing. The fact that you're openly soliciting feedback, and that's one of those role model things that other people will copy. Gabe asks for feedback. We ask for feedback. It suddenly doesn't become a big scary thing. It's just one of the conversations that we have. Sometimes it's useful to think about what is the context for the feedback, because if you're just kind of saying, and obviously I don't know the context of how you're asking. If you're just saying, how am I doing? It's like, well, fine. Yeah, right. Yeah, so everything's all right. If it's in relation to something specific, So perhaps there's a particular project that you're working on, and it's actually woven into the process it's woven into the project management that at various points we're going to have a conversation where we say, okay, everybody give me some feedback. How do you feel that I've done on this, that, and the other, on articulating the project plan and the strategy, on delegating and allocating tasks? If somebody has something specific, it's easier for them to say, well, actually, I felt that you delegated that to Jemima again, and I really wanted to do that. And, she always gets that job. So I think, oh, okay, this is giving me something to work with. So it's useful to direct it to something really specific. It may also be that sometimes I think the further up the organization you get, and it's obviously it's the opposite way around. In large organizations, you're climbing up a structure that's already there. As you're building your business, it's kind of like growing underneath you. So the further up you get for whatever reason, is perhaps to acknowledge that people aren't openly going to come and give you feedback. It may be that there's a particular scenario that you set up. So, right, I'm going to have a focus group with Team A because I want to know how am I and the leadership team doing? And there's some specific things that I would like to focus on, like what's your understanding of our strategy at the moment? What's your because it's giving them something clear to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's also the thing about just ensuring that amongst your senior leadership team that you are consistently giving each other feedback. Because again, it's like however open you are as a person, however warm and what's authentic you are as a human being, in other people's minds, it's like you're still the boss. It's unlikely, even if you say, my door's open, like my door's open, just come on in. And no, doesn't matter where you are, nobody ever does.
I know.
Because they just don't, and they won't. So find a specific context about which to have that conversation. And sometimes asking some questions, I would really like to know how this is landing with you. How am I doing this, that, and the other? How is the senior leadership team doing this? And genuinely to invite that feedback about something specific may well get you more value than asking me, how do you think we're doing? Does that make sense, Gabe?
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad that you said that, because if you get super specific, then it makes it more approachable for the other person, especially like you just said. Just being honest, like it's been a little bit of a challenge for me to realize that people consider me to be the boss. And I know that sounds very silly to say maybe, but like I have to remember, I actually asked for and got some very good feedback yesterday. And the other thing that I've not been great about over the years, but I've worked hard to improve, I think in the last 2 years, is if I ask you for feedback, I just need to listen and not get defensive about what you say. And like sometimes I see people ask for feedback and then I'm like, oh, well, if it was me, like this is the areas I'd improve. And then they get all, prickly about it. And it's like, well, why did you ask me?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And actually, there's a couple of things there, just quickly jumping back to the thing about asking for specific feedback. If you say to people, so how am I doing? It's almost like you're inviting them to make a comment about you personally. You're a great guy, Gabe.
Right.
You've been asking. If it's about something specific, it's about a thing that you did. So you're still a great guy, Gabe. But, that email you sent last week, it's about the thing rather than you, which actually takes a lot of the fear factor out of it. Feedback is a gift, and you think, yeah, sometimes it's really not, but it is. It's always there to help our self-awareness. If somebody gives you feedback that is really not specific, and they're saying, well, do you know what, Gabe? You don't have to go on, do you? What were you thinking? And they're just going off on a rant. Then I think it's perfectly justifiable to say, can you be? I'm sorry you felt like that, but could you be specific? What was it exactly that I did to cause that impression for you? Because if they're just going, right, Annabelle, for goodness sake, what on earth did you think you were doing there? It was an absolute farce. I don't know. I just know that I've done something to annoy them, but I don't know what behavior it is I need to fix. If they say, Annabelle, do you know what? Deborah, Jim, and Carey were desperately trying to make a comment there and you would not be quiet. They just couldn't get a word in. Then I go, oh, yeah, right enough. I do talk a bit much. So, but that's the thing. If it's something that's really waffly and vague, by all means ask the question to clarify exactly what they mean, so you know how you can improve. If it's just a bit of a tirade, then perhaps you just need to accept the fact that you've annoyed them more, but take that with a pinch of salt. However uncomfortable it might be, if everyone's saying the same thing, they're not all wrong. So yeah. A lot of emotional intelligence involved in this whole thing, giving feedback and also taking it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super valuable, and it's like it's also can be challenging because like you have to make sure that you're in a good state and attitude to receive it, and you have to be aware of, like, I love what you just said, like you have to be aware of the state of the other person because they may have just had a really bad day, and like sometimes when I ask for feedback, I realize that I just need to actually listen to the other person and support them by listening, and it has nothing to do with me. But I like what you said to come back and say, like, I appreciate you sharing that you're frustrated or that all these things you just said. Can you share with me specifically what you think we should improve or what I can change? And I like that because it brings things into crystal clear focus. And I also think in a really healthy way, it puts responsibility back on the person giving you feedback. Because if you just come and meet with me and say, Gabe, you're screwing it all up and like blah, 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 and you just go on, then I realize, like you said, there's some emotions there. But I legitimately do want to improve. So I'm going to tell you what specifically can I improve for you, Annabelle. And there's been some scenarios, both in internal teams and with clients and just interactions, where I've asked to get specific like 3 or 4 times and the other person cannot do it. And that tells me that they really haven't thought through what they're upset about, or I don't. And I at the end of those conversations where I've asked a few times, then I'll just say, well, I understand that you're upset, but I'm not sure what to change. And I've asked you a few times that, and I'm just like really upfront with my language. And so I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like you also have to know, like, there's some feedback that doesn't matter. Like that feedback was not about you at all. The person is having a bad day or they have a different challenge and they can't articulate that or identify it. So maybe you just, ideally you can try to support them through whatever they're going through. But there's nothing you're going to do about it, and it has nothing to do with you. So
that's it. Yeah, that's absolutely it. Absolutely it.
Yeah, and so it's definitely a balance. And I also like what you said about, like, as your organization grows, like getting into more specific focus groups, because I've definitely been guilty of, and it's something that I'll improve on, of just asking, like, not that broad, but like, how am I doing? Or like, what does everybody think? And like, of course, thinks everything great. Like, or what, and yeah, and like unintentionally, I feel you're right. I think that probably sounded like I was just fishing for compliments, or there wasn't anything productive around that. And so, clarity on all things as always is super helpful. So I think that's a great point.
Just to sort of focus the discussion. Otherwise, I actually, with you, Gabe, I certainly wouldn't imagine for a moment that you were fishing for compliments, but it's just that sort of vagueness of like, well, I don't know. Ooh.
Yeah.
Then you can think, oh yeah, right enough. At that meeting, it was a bit this, or no, I thought you chaired it brilliantly well. Even people who were quiet were coming forward with loads of ideas. So I thought that was great. And at least then you're getting positive feedback that is also specific, and you're going, note to self. The thing that I should continue doing is making sure even quieter people have a say, et cetera, et cetera. So there's also making sure that you get specific feedback when it's positive. So it's not just fine, great, everything's great, because you think, yeah, great. If that's not telling me what's great and what I can continue, and that specific information is also incredibly useful.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that's worth bringing up too is not only is it hard, it's a shift in your culture to get consistent feedback at all levels, up and down and all around, but also I think that people need to be super intentional about giving positive feedback, because it's obviously easy to be like, you dropped the ball on that, and like, that wasn't good and whatever. I think as I think about feedback, in the ideal, try to model this and work hard at this at least, but in the ideal in an organization, it's kind of like, exercise, like the more critical or negative feedback, which is okay, helps us grow, and that's like working things out. But we also need in our physical life, like rest and relaxation, or the positive. And you can't be extreme on either end, and because it's not healthy. It's synchronizing those together. And so I've worked hard to intentionally also share as much positive feedback as I can. And I don't have like some tracker or like stats on it, but I try to consciously balance positive feedback that's going out when I see things that are good, so people know they're on the right track, and more like constructive feedback or areas for improvement. And balancing that is just something I intentionally work on. But I don't know if there's like a methodology or mechanism to make it more exact, but I just try to always balance those out as well.
Yeah. I don't think there is a methodology, or I think what you're doing is exactly right, is balancing it out, because sometimes you do get into I've been in organizations where the only feedback you get is negative. If nobody's speaking to you at all, you're probably okay. But it's still not helpful because you're not moving forward with any speed in a given direction. You haven't been told, you're doing a terrific job there, Jemima. Just carry on doing what you're doing, in which case, full steam ahead for Jemima. Jemima's still going, is this all right? Nobody's told me that I shouldn't. So people are moving forward hesitantly rather than at speed. So it's absolutely like the best practice is to make sure that you're giving honest and balanced feedback. Where it becomes a bit kind of like a bit cheesy is where people do go too far and think, right, I've got to give a positive bit of feedback every day. And, and it gets the right, Janice, I really like your blouse today. It just becomes, or it's nothingness. It's like, make it meaningful, make it genuine, so that when you do say, do you know what, Sanjay, I really appreciated the way that you stayed over, you stayed for an extra couple of hours the other evening to finish that project. And above and beyond the call of duty, the client was absolutely delighted. Thank you so much. And for that person to think, I have been recognised, and yes, I did do a good job, rather than some kind of facile remark where it's like, oh, Annabelle's just ticked the box because that, she's given a piece of positive feedback for the day. Don't make it like that. It has to be authentic, isn't it? People can smell insincerity a mile off. So keep it real. Yeah,
definitely. Awesome. Well, just a few more questions here. One, I'm just curious how long it took you to write the book, because I know is it coming out in June or July? When is it going to be?
On the 7th. So it took me, well, apart from the 20 years it took me to figure it all out, it actually took quite a long time. And I'll tell you for why. I started writing it about 18 months ago, and then I was consumed by imposter syndrome. On one hand, I was using this with my clients and my customers, and I knew it worked. And whenever I sat down to try and write the book, there was this voice in my head going, who the hell are you, Beckwith? Who's going to care about this? This is, who do you think you are? And so I kept putting it aside. And the thing that finally, I did quite a lot of personal development work, especially towards the latter end of last year. And the thing that really galvanized me into action is that I made a decision. I thought, right, stuff it. I'm going to write the thing, come hell or high water. And I actually booked, I haven't finished writing it. I still have about 2/3 to go, but I booked it in with a proofreader. And I thought, right, okay, I've got to get it done by beginning of February then, because it's going to this person. So it probably took me about 4 months to write it once I was consistently writing it. But it was a battle of wills for quite a long time. Now that I have written it, and I can see the interest that it's getting, and people are going, yes, you're right, and how people are using the principles and they work, then I'm thinking, yeah, I'm very proud of it. It's my life's work. It's my life's work. It is my best work. I feel I'm really proud of it. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't like I had an idea, I sat down and write a book. No. Yeah. It was a battle of wills, a battle against the imposter to actually get the thing done.
Yeah, it's I have a couple very short books that I wrote quite a few years ago, but I've been sitting like I want to write my next book, and I'm in the same place as you. And like, he shared something I think that's wise, that you basically engineered accountability in to make you get it done. So I've just come up with a similar idea that I think I may do that will be pretty interesting, because I don't think anybody's written a book the way I'm about to try doing it. But It's going to involve accountability from other people, because that's the only way I'm going to get it done. Because there's always like, I got something else I got to get done today, or I'll write tomorrow, or like, and that obviously doesn't accomplish anything. So I know the effort it takes. And interestingly enough, and this is just, I think this is worth sharing with people, like I coach people on writing their books all the time. Like, so I know exactly how to help people write a book, and I can't do it for myself. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to have to either get a coach or create another scenario. And so I'm toying with this other scenario that you probably see come out here a little bit later. But yeah, that's awesome. And it's also important to note, like, it only took you 4 months. It didn't take you 4 years. When you actually just put your mind to it, like, you got it done. Like, if you have, like you have all this experience and all the years you've done this, then sitting down to write what you already know is not that difficult. It's just the push to do it.
Yes.
And I also think that it's important to note that, like, I already know your book is going to be massively successful because you have years of experience, and that's what the book is about. And I think sometimes people try to write a book or put something out there and they don't have enough experience to write a book. Like, go just stick to what you're doing and get some years in and get some experience and stay in the trenches. And then when the timing is right and you actually have some depth and experience, those are the things that are going to really take off. And that, to me, that just speaks to like who I see you as and like how you show up. It's always with depth and experience, and that's how you show up, and you're the real deal. Like you've done it. And just like you mentioned, with, your earlier story, and I had the same thing. I had warning signs about my ex-partner that stole from me. If you pay attention to how people show up online, if you pay attention to what they write about, what they speak about, and who they are, and you start to watch for those patterns, and this is for everybody just listening and watching, you'll start to notice who's real and who's not. Like if you're not already dialed into that, take a step back and like look at the patterns or pay attention, because a true experienced leader can give you super specific direction and feedback, and will use real examples from their life and real examples from their career, and they will teach you with the stories that they lived. Whereas the made up coaches and the people that are shallow and are really out there just pulling a con will never give you specificity, and will never give you the step by step of how to get there, or the principles that you need to get there. And so I would just encourage everybody to watch for that, because there are amazing people out there like Annabelle that can lead you forward, and those are the ones you're looking for. And you need to watch out for the people that are pretending to be leaders as well. So
there's quite a few of them about. There's quite a few of them,
unfortunately. So everybody can check out Annabelle's 2 sites. We'll put those in the show notes as well. But your book is going to be on AnnabelleBeckwith.com, I assume. Is that correct?
It is. I also and that website is going to be up shortly. I've been saying that for ages, but it really is going to be soon. Meanwhile, though, I do have a Facebook page that is called Get Your P's in a Row. So I'm going to be announcing when the website is up and running there, and dropping pieces of information, little, bits and pieces from the book, just in the run up to the launch. So if you'd like to join me at that Facebook page, please do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, Annabelle. It's always a blast to hang out with you and move people forward. So we'll definitely have you back again soon too. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This show is brought to you by Today's Business Leaders. Learn more at our website, todaysbusinessleaders.com. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today.